Sarah never imagined that a broken porch light would change the course of her life. It was late evening, and the sky had turned various shades of gray. Standing outside, she balanced a flashlight in one hand and a screwdriver in the other, frustration mounting with each failed attempt to fix the light. "Need some help?" a warm voice called from the sidewalk. She turned to see Daniel, her neighbor, standing there with his sleeves rolled up and a smile that seemed too easy to trust. "I think this light has declared war on me," Sarah chuckled, stepping aside. Daniel climbed the small steps, reached for the fixture, and with a few swift motions, the light flickered back to life. The warm glow washed over them both. "You've got magic hands," Sarah said, half joking. "Nah," Daniel grinned. "Just a habit of fixing things." That night, Sarah found herself thinking about him more than she wanted to admit. He was kind, the type of person who remembered names, greeted strangers, and always had time to help. Over the next few weeks, their paths continued to cross. Brief greetings in the driveway, a smile across the yard. Each encounter felt natural, almost comforting. One afternoon, Sarah's son Omar was outside struggling with his bicycle chain. Daniel walked by, knelt beside him, and quietly fixed the jammed chain with practiced ease. "You're good at this," Omar said, wide-eyed. "Had a bike just like this when I was your age," Daniel smiled. Sarah watched from the doorway, her heart unexpectedly warming. Daniel had this way of making people feel seen without judgment or expectations. Days turned into weeks, and Daniel's presence became a part of Sarah's routine. He'd wave from his porch, sometimes holding a coffee cup, other times just lost in thought. When their eyes met, his smile always seemed genuine, never forced. Sarah found herself looking forward to those moments more than she cared to admit. One evening, after a long day at work, Sarah returned home feeling exhausted. She found Daniel standing outside, tossing a tennis ball against his garage wall. "Rough day?" he asked. "Something like that," Sarah sighed. Without another word, Daniel handed her the tennis ball. "Try it," he said. Sarah laughed, but took the ball, tossing it against the wall. It bounced back perfectly, the simple rhythm feeling strangely calming. "You're not bad," Daniel teased. "You're just being nice," she replied with a smile. For a few minutes, they stood there in quiet comfort, tossing the ball back and forth like two old friends. When Sarah finally went inside, she felt lighter, as if the weight of her day had been lifted simply by his presence. That night, she couldn't stop thinking about him, his patience, his kindness, and the way he seemed to know exactly what she needed without her saying a word. She never expected someone like Daniel to become a part of her life, but somehow it felt like he belonged there all along. Sarah couldn't ignore how Daniel's presence kept weaving into her life. It started with small things, casual conversations over the fence, shared smiles that lingered longer than they should have. Then it became more. One evening, she found Daniel sitting on her porch steps, teaching Omar how to solve math problems. Omar's face lit up with excitement, and Daniel's patience never wavered. "Mom, Daniel's way better at explaining this than my teacher," Omar grinned. Sarah laughed, but she couldn't ignore the warmth in her chest. Daniel wasn't just kind, he cared in a way that felt deeply genuine. He never tried too hard, yet his presence was steady, like he quietly decided they mattered to him. One chilly afternoon, Sarah stood in her kitchen, staring blankly at a pile of unopened mail. Bills, reminders, obligations. It felt endless. She barely noticed the knock at the door until Daniel's voice called out, "Hey, I made too much coffee. Thought you might want some," he said, holding up 2 steaming mugs. The kindness hit her harder than she expected. "You read my mind," she said with a tired smile. "I just figured everyone needs a good cup of coffee sometimes." They ended up sitting on her porch, sipping quietly as the wind whispered through the trees. Sarah surprised herself when she began talking about her struggles as a single mom, about feeling overwhelmed, about how hard it was to balance everything. She hadn't meant to share so much, but Daniel just listened. No judgment, no empty advice, just quiet understanding. "I get it," he said softly. "Life's not easy when you're carrying it all alone." His words stayed with her long after he'd left. Over time, Daniel became more than just a friendly neighbor. He was there when Sarah needed a laugh, when Omar needed a hand, when the weight of the world felt too much. Yet with every smile, every lingering glance, Sarah felt something stirring inside her, something she wasn't sure she was ready for. One evening, after dropping Omar at a friend's house, Sarah found herself walking past Daniel's house. He was outside, working on his car. She paused. "Need a hand?" she joked. He grinned. "You offering to fix my engine?" "Don't underestimate me," she teased. They ended up sitting on his front steps, the car forgotten. The conversation flowed easily, from light jokes to deeper stories. Memories of Daniel's late father, the tough years he'd faced rebuilding his life. His voice softened when he spoke of regret, about wishing he'd spent more time with the people he loved. "I guess that's why I try to show up now," Daniel said quietly, "for the people who matter." The words hit Sarah harder than she expected. She wanted to say something, to admit that he mattered more than she knew how to express, but she couldn't find the words. Instead, she whispered, "I'm glad you're here." Daniel's smile lingered, soft and certain. "Me too." The storm rolled in faster than anyone expected. The wind howled through the streets and rain lashed against the windows. Sarah tried to stay calm, but Omar clung to her side, his face pale as the power flickered and went out. "Mom, what if the power doesn't come back?" he whispered. "It will," she promised, hoping her voice didn't betray her own uncertainty. Moments later, there was a knock at the door. Sarah opened it to find Daniel, soaked from the rain, but smiling like nothing was wrong. "I thought you two might need some company," he said, holding up a flashlight and a small bag of candles. Relief washed over Sarah. "You didn't have to come out in this. I wanted to." The 3 of them huddled in the living room, the flickering candlelight casting shadows on the walls. Daniel kept Omar entertained with funny stories about his childhood mishaps, the kind that made Omar forget about the storm outside. When Omar finally drifted off to sleep, Daniel and Sarah sat quietly on the couch. The room felt warmer than it should have, as if his presence alone pushed away the cold. "I don't know how you always show up at the right time," Sarah said softly. "I just care," Daniel answered, his voice steady. But there was something more in his eyes, something deeper. Sarah knew she couldn't avoid it anymore. The feelings she'd been trying to push down were too strong to ignore. "I need to tell you something," she said, her hands fidgeting in her lap. "I feel something for you, but I'm scared." Daniel's expression softened. "Scared of what?" "Of getting too close," she confessed. "Of losing someone again. of this being too complicated. Daniel reached for her hand, his fingers warm against hers. "I'm not here to rush you," he said quietly. "I'm here because I want to be, and I'm not going anywhere." His words sank in, steady and certain. Something inside her softened, the wall she'd built for years finally starting to crack. "I don't want this to stop," she whispered. "Promise me. Promise me you won't stop." Daniel squeezed her hand gently. "I'll never stop," he said. "Not if you'll have me." For the first time in a long while, Sarah felt safe, not just because the storm was passing, but because she knew Daniel's words weren't empty. He was the kind of man who kept his promises, and somehow that meant everything. Weeks turned into months, and Daniel's presence remained constant. He became part of their lives in a way that felt effortless. Whether it was helping Omar with school projects, fixing things around the house, or simply showing up when Sarah needed someone most, he never wavered. One evening, Sarah found herself cooking dinner while Daniel sat at the table, helping Omar with homework. The sound of their laughter filled the room, blending with the soft clatter of dishes and the faint hum of the radio. It felt like home, not just a place, but a feeling she hadn't experienced in years. Over time, Sarah began to notice the little things. The way Daniel always made sure Omar felt included, how he never forced his way into their lives, but always seemed to know when they needed him most. He became a steady rhythm in their world, and Sarah couldn't imagine life without him. But love wasn't without its challenges. Conversations about their differences surfaced, their backgrounds, their beliefs. While they respected each other's values, Sarah couldn't ignore her fears. What if their worlds clashed? What if what they had wasn't strong enough to last? One evening, after dinner, Daniel found her sitting quietly on the porch, lost in thought. He didn't ask questions. He just sat beside her. The silence settled comfortably between them. "I know you're scared," he finally said, "but I meant what I said that night. I'm not going anywhere." Sarah turned to face him, her voice barely above a whisper. "What if this doesn't work?" "It will," Daniel said firmly, "because we want it to." His confidence eased her doubts. He didn't promise perfection, but he promised to try, and somehow that felt even more powerful. Months later, after a quiet dinner at home, Daniel surprised Sarah with a simple yet heartfelt gesture. He pulled a small box from his pocket, no grand speech, no elaborate setup, just him looking at her the way he always did, like she was the most important person in the world. "I love you," he said, his voice steady. "And I want to be part of this, part of your life, part of Omar's life, forever, only if you'll have me." Tears welled in Sarah's eyes. She didn't need time to think. She already knew the answer. "Yes," she whispered, 1,000 times, "yes." As he slipped the ring onto her finger, she felt a sense of calm wash over her. It wasn't just about romance or promises. It was about trust. Trust in the quiet moments, in the shared days, in the certainty that Daniel wouldn't stop showing up. He never had, and she knew now he never would. Their life together unfolded with quiet beauty, built on moments that felt simple yet meaningful. Daniel wasn't just her partner. He became a steady presence in Omar's world, too. Whether it was attending soccer games, helping with school projects, or simply showing up when Omar needed advice, Daniel was there. Never pushing, never demanding, just present. One evening, Omar sat at the kitchen table, frustrated over a history project. Daniel leaned over, guiding him through the research with endless patience. "You're really good at this," Omar said with a grin. "Just takes practice," Daniel replied, "and a little patience." Later that night, Sarah found herself sitting beside Daniel on the couch, her head resting on his shoulder. The room was quiet, save for the soft ticking of the clock. "You know," she murmured, "I don't think I ever believed I could feel this safe." Daniel's arm tightened around her. "You deserve it," he said softly. "You always have." Challenges still found their way into their lives, but they faced them together. When Sarah's job demanded late hours, Daniel stepped in without hesitation. Cooking dinner, helping Omar with school, making sure their homes still felt balanced. When Daniel's mother fell ill, Sarah stood by him, driving him to hospital visits, reminding him that he didn't have to carry the burden alone. One evening, after weeks of long days and restless nights, Sarah broke down. Exhausted and overwhelmed, she sat on the edge of her bed, her face buried in her hands. Without a word, Daniel knelt beside her, taking her hand in his. "You don't have to do this all by yourself," he whispered. "I'm just tired," she admitted, her voice shaking. "What if I can't hold everything together?" "You don't have to," he said. "That's why I'm here." His words weren't just comforting, they were a promise, one he kept every day. As time passed, their love grew deeper, not because life was perfect, but because they chose to stand by each other through it all. Daniel's presence remained steady, a quiet reminder that she was never alone. Through every moment, the hard days, the laughter, the quiet nights, Sarah knew one thing for certain. She had once begged him not to stop, and he never did. Life settled into a rhythm that felt almost effortless. Mornings began with quiet moments, Daniel pouring coffee while Sarah packed Omar's lunch. Evenings were filled with shared dinners, conversations that danced between laughter and deeper thoughts, and nights spent unwinding in each other's presence. It wasn't flashy or dramatic. It was steady, real, and exactly what Sarah had always hoped for. Omar grew closer to Daniel with each passing day. He no longer hesitated to ask him for advice or share moments that mattered. When Omar scored his first goal at a soccer game, it was Daniel he ran to first, wrapping his arms around him in excitement. "I knew you could do it," Daniel told him, his voice filled with warmth. Moments like that became more frequent, small but powerful reminders that Daniel wasn't just part of their lives. He was family. But love wasn't always easy. One evening, Sarah received a phone call from her brother, who voiced concerns about her relationship with Daniel. He worried about their differences, cultures, beliefs, and questioned if it could truly last. His words lingered in her mind, stirring old fears she thought she had buried. That night, Sarah sat quietly on the porch, her thoughts tangled. Daniel noticed her silence and joined her, sensing something was wrong. "Want to talk about it?" he asked gently. She hesitated, then finally spoke. "Do you ever wonder if this will be too hard? If we're too different?" Daniel didn't answer right away. Instead, he reached for her hand, his fingers lacing through hers. "I don't see it that way," he said. "I see two people who care enough to make it work, no matter what." His words cut through her doubt. Love wasn't about being the same. It was about choosing each other again and again. Weeks later, Daniel proved that once again. Omar had a school recital, and Sarah was swamped at work. Unable to make it in time, she arrived breathless and flustered, only to spot Daniel in the front row, clapping proudly. Omar's face lit up when he saw him, and Sarah's heart swelled with gratitude. "You didn't have to do that," she said later. "Yes, I did," Daniel replied, "because that's what family does." In moments big and small, Daniel kept showing her what love meant. Not just in words, but in the quiet ways he never stopped choosing them. Sarah knew now that love wasn't just about promises. It was about presence. And no matter how life shifted, Daniel had never once stopped showing up. He never hesitated, never wavered, and she knew he never would.